Welcome to our second session. These are the automated buildings free industry sessions, and we're here for a second session. And this session is we're going to be talking about how the BAS industry has moved over to primarily an IP industry. BAS has gone IP. I'm Scott Cochran. I'll be your host for this session. A lot of you were in our first session. I did my intro. I'll do a brief one. I'm a building controls distributor. We distribute products from multiple BAS vendors. We work primarily with contractors, BAS contractors that install it. And we're very fortunate that through our customers, we've seen countless projects, countless implementations, and we try to learn from that at Cochran Supply and share those learnings with the industry and our customers to help us all evolve in new and interesting ways. And so that's why I'm here hosting this today, and I'm glad to be here. So with that, I'd like to introduce the panelists that are with me today. We'll start with the in-room panelists, and I'll start with Greg Fitzpatrick. Greg is with Cochran Supply as well, and Greg helps us by working with consulting engineers and helping design OT networks for BAS projects. Greg, little introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming to this session. I think it's going to be pretty informative. Like Scott said, I work in business development for Cochran Supply and Engineering in the area of IoT and integration. My primary responsibility is calling on consulting engineers because they are more behind the times than most of our contractors are. Real quick, by the show of hands, how many consulting engineers do we have here? One. Contractors or systems integrators? How about end users and distributors? Okay, so we don't have many consulting engineers here, but I've been in the industry for over 25 years. I've worked as a consulting engineer. I ran my own firm for a number of years. I've worked for both train and carrier, selling equipment controls, turnkey projects and the likes. Also worked as a director of facilities for a large school district. So I've been around the block. I've seen a lot of things. And I also own my own commissioning firm for years. So I got a chance to see controls being implemented. I've gotten a chance to see a lot of technicians out in the field when controls were supposed to be completed, but they weren't, right? So when we go to functional test, controls weren't completed. So now that we're entering a new stage in our ecosystem with IP controls, one of our main focuses has been to get the consulting engineering community up to speed with designing systems and allowing us to move forward with that technology.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. All right, and also what we have with us, also another Detroiter. I bring my crowd with me, I guess, but this is John Gargiola. He is a director of facilities with Bedrock, based out of Detroit. And Bedrock is one of the first property owners that Cochran Supply has worked with that evolved their all of their networks over to IP and over to like their own dedicated OT networks, and they did this stuff like 8 years ago is when they started doing this. And now they see the benefits of it at scale. And we're really fortunate to have John here from Bedrock. John?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, John Gargiola, SVP of Engineering and Sustainability. And I think probably the clearest thing for me to say is I'm the old school engineer who, before BAS was around, BAS was myself and other engineers running around and sitting in mechanical rooms, and kind of evolved from there. But when I joined Bedrock 9 years ago, we had a vision of buying lots of properties and expanding in Detroit and Cleveland. And we knew that right away we would have to, Dan Gilbert is the owner of the company, and he used to say we're an IT company that happens to sell mortgages. And what that tells you is that everything we did from day one was based on technology, and the smart building platforms that we have now was no different. We started, years ago creating a smart specification for smart building and installs, et cetera, that we created, put in place, and then as we bought buildings and the portfolio grew. We basically had these specifications that we sat down with our architects, our VP engineers as they were designing either TIs or ground ups, et cetera, and we control that. And the last thing I'll say to that, and Scott knows this because we've been partners in this, is we've created a in-house controls team that oversees this for us, content experts in the field to help us out with that. So lots of great experience in working with these folks, and it's definitely paid a lot of benefits. You know, once again, I'm not the technical guy, but I'm the guy that asks, can I, should I want to, and we get it done using our partners.
Yeah, John's been a fearless business leader for technology for as long as I've known him at Bedrock. It's been a very fun journey and very exciting to talk about. Okay, and also another from an end user perspective, we also have with us Sabrina Lamb from Google. She's up here remote. She's coming to us from California. She's Google, interestingly enough, they're interested in buildings. They're very interested in buildings, and they've built quite a team around that. And Sabine is a part of a very interesting group of people at Google that are probably vetting out some of the best practices of tomorrow for especially for IT networks and buildings to support them. So Sabine, welcome to the program. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me. Hello to everybody. Hope everything's going well in Vegas. So yeah, Sabine from Google. I lead governance and product development. So I'm not only I'm listening to the business, which is the Google business. What do they need? And we'll focus on the how. And how can we do it at the Google scale? How do we automate the process? How do we make it work with the lens of an IT company? So the background is IT, the background is big data, and how do we apply that to this industry of operation technology? So a lot of the solution we're looking at really are looking to focus on cybersecurity, looking to make a change. We're not accepting status quo, and we're large enough, we think, that we may have the ability to share our knowledge in the IT world and help improve the industry and really solve for those complex use cases that everybody has in mind. So nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Sabine. Super excited to have you. And then our final panelist, of course, we'd like to get the contractor point of view. So we have Scott Papay from Long Building Technologies in Denver. He's also coming in remote on the screen here. And Scott has, and Long Building Technologies have been early adopters of IP-based control systems. They've got a vast knowledge now of installing them, the pitfalls, the good, the bad. So I'm super excited to have Scott on our panel to talk about some of that. Scott, welcome to the panel.
Thank you very much. Wish I could be there with everyone. I unexpectedly ended up with a cough, so here I am.
Well, you're probably doing the right thing, Scott. So good thing we got our virtual, our garage hybrid environment here that we built on our own here this morning. But glad to have you. So Scott, a little introduction to yourself and Long and some of your philosophy on the IP industry.
Sure, yeah. Long Building Technology has been around for 50 years. We are in kind of the northwest, the continental United States, as well as Alaska. And we are a house that has installed Schneider Electric, Distech, KMC, Network 8000, old legacy product lines from back in the day, and as well as we're a Vicon partner as well. So we've kind of seen the evolution of MSTP to IP networks, from ArcNet back in the day to now Wi-Fi technologies and everything else. So yes, we've been on the front end of this for a while.
Awesome. And you've learned a lot of lessons, right?
We've learned a ton of lessons. I mean, I'd be happy to go into those now, or if you
no, save them. We're going to get to that. So, okay. All right. So thank you all my panelists for being here. So in order to kind of frame up this conversation, again, we're talking about how the BAS industry has moved over to IP. So let me kind of start with, what does that mean? What are you actually saying there? Well, what we're saying, it's kind of simple. It's that the application controllers, that used to be on 485 or LAN have now been moved over to Ethernet, IP, right? And they're no longer 485. Well, these new controllers, and this has only been, I mean, while some manufacturers started this 5-6 years ago, the mass majority of them really just started this about 2-3 years ago, where they created complete lines of BAS controls that were all IP. So it's brand new to the BAS industry. Now, when we first realized that is when I partnered, I brought Greg Fitzpatrick. He was working as an independent commissioning agent. And Greg, I took Greg to lunch and said, I'm going to hire you right now, Greg. And he said, really? Because why? I said, well, we got a lot of work to do with the engineering community because right now we're going through this epic change where their 485 drawings are wrong. They're not cyber secure, and they are not going to meet the owner's needs of tomorrow. And so we made it our sincere effort to try to enable our local engineering community by sending Greg out and offering to do an education and free IP designs and things of that nature. Yeah. And so with that, we were fortunate that Greg got quite a few projects specified around us, and we got to see those projects get installed last summer. So this past summer. And these were the first real design projects that were all IP based that we saw get installed. Now, the first thing that we noticed about an all IP based project was that there were no gateways needed. So a lot of you have heard of the JACE or a serial to Ethernet gateway of some sort in a system. Well, we found out we don't need those. They serve no purpose. The IP devices are smart enough where the gateway is sort of a lucky, it's only there, could be added as redundancy in a good design, right? The controllers themselves, where in prior times when we would specify things like sampling rates or how much data it was to carry or things of that nature, those specifications were obsoleted. And we replaced them with unlimited data capabilities into the specifications in terms of data sampling, data rates, things of that nature. Huge change. I mean, we saw different people looking at that differently. We've got large industrial customers whom have been using BAS systems from us for years. They got excited. They were like, wait a minute, I don't have to worry about the sampling rate anymore. The number of samples, the data I'm bringing back. We're like, no. Because IP, we have the bandwidth now. Did you know that like an IP network versus a serial network has got like 10 million times more bandwidth to move data? It's a ridiculous number, folks. It's literally, think about this, it's like 256K versus 10 gig. Oh my gosh, do you guys know what that's like? That's like having a string of hair versus a 42-inch pipe, okay? That's the net difference in the connection to our new controllers, right? And so an incredible amount of new data can be moved at an incredible rate. And when you talk about people that want to do analytics on buildings, you know, we used to play with what we would call big data in our industry. Oh no. We haven't seen big data yet. These new IP infrastructures with the new capabilities to move data like never before, we're going to be able to see analytics like we never did. Why? Because we're going to be able to get every bit of data back into these models for analysis, okay? Which was a total limitation before. And as we've studied the IP more, we learn more. We learn more about these devices not only can communicate at a much more rapid rate, but they also have the ability to do many more things within the application, whether it be to have its own programming tool locally, whether it be to have the ability to be simply, plug and play type capability into connected networks. So we're seeing, because of the ease of being able to connect these devices just through things like physical patch cables and stuff like that, we noticed the time went down on installation for the contractors. And Scott's going to talk a little more, but we saw, and frankly, from a contractor point of view, I think Scott would agree, there's a lot of projects now, if they can do a redesign, they can actually give them a deduct to move it from 485 to all IP. And so we're starting to see that as a byproduct of it. And as the owners start to take these systems on and they start to see the benefits, what are they seeing? Well, it's exponential, because as BAS has gone to IP, it simply has got caught up with the other things that these people are dealing with, like their elevators and their escalators and their fire and security systems. And so now they can holistically start to look at networks and potentially use them for total building control if the use case makes sense, which again, was never really a cost-effective option. And so really, while we sit here on, I would say, our third year of this evolution, the capabilities of the industry is exponentially, like, they're 100 times more than they used to be. And we're just now starting to see people truly take advantage of it. So again, to frame up the conversation, I think let's start with the design cycle. And I'm gonna put Greg on the hot seat here. And I'm gonna ask Greg a basic question. Greg, how do consulting engineers take this change? I mean, and I'm not talking like them bringing in IT people. I'm talking about an MEP with a typical 485 BAS design.
Yep.
Tell us about some of the reaction you get when you propose and start talking about IP.
They have been literally kicking and screaming, literally kicking and screaming. And if you know anything about the consulting engineering world, is that they don't like change. They don't respond well to change. Because your specification has to be updated. You have to think about coordination within your office. So if you've got a mechanical and electrical engineering firm, then you've got coordination between the mechanical engineers who are designing the systems and the electrical engineers, right? So if we're talking about IP networks or OT networks, now we're talking about getting multiple disciplines involved. So what we've done is we've gone out and tried to make it easy. We've also introduced what I call a systems integration drawing, right? Which is a topology drawing that gives the systems integrator enough information such that he wouldn't even have to dig into the drawings to put together a price or to know if whether or not that project is something he's interested in. So when you look at a systems integration drawing, it shows everything from the physical cabinet, right? What we like to call our OT network MDF cabinet. This shows your server, if there's a on-premise server being deployed. It shows your server. It shows where your web supervisor is going to be deployed. It shows your network management switches, your front-end network management switches, your VPN, your firewall. It shows every floor, the switches, the IP switches that accommodate the technology, and it shows the technology that's going to be integrated. So what we've been doing is pushing that drawing out to the consulting engineering community, but we've been designing systems for them. And not only for the engineers, but also for MSIs to get them to embrace the technology, to know that they'll have a partner and holding their hands to get them through the first project or two, right? Because I've had consulting engineers tell me that they now treat controls or BAS like fire protection. They put out a performance spec and a one-line diagram. And if you're a systems integrator in here, by show of hands, how many times have you seen complete documents for a true integration project? By show of hands. Right, exactly. So what we're trying to do is tell the consulting engineers that, hey, look, our ecosystem is taking a sharp left turn right now. And this is technology that a lot of young people are interested in. So get some of the young people at the firm interested in the technology and start learning the technology so you can get it in a set of plans and specifications. So that's been our approach.
Yeah, and so the really hard thing about the engineering community was that the MEPs in the old designs would rely on the BAS vendor to supply essentially the operating system, the network requirements, they kind of did it all for you.
The front end.
In the old days, right? Well, with these new IP-based systems, the MEP is now challenged with standing up an IP network. Now, in some cases, they work with the owners, and these networks are things that the owners provide. But when the owner doesn't provide it, now the MEP actually has to provide a working IT network, right? Which is something that typically was left to the IT people to do, right? And so it's a change. It's a change for our industry. Now we've seen, Greg and I have seen a lot of in the design side where they bring IT people in to help. And of course that's great, right? Because they bring a lot of expertise and things of that nature.
Right.
But it does not relieve the MAP, the actual mechanical engineer, from understanding what that design is and why it's designed that way. The MEP is still responsible for a working HVAC system, and that includes that network that supports the controllers that are on it. And so, as Greg mentioned, kicking and screaming. No, I'm sorry, you have to learn what an IP address is, Mr. CE. It is what it is. So we saw that quite a bit, and but now that Greg's had some successes, and now we're finding MEPs feel empowered, right, with this new knowledge and with the new flexibility in their designs. Didn't you say so, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my approaches also has been to put a little fear in the MEP, right? Because when most engineers are designing systems, they're always thinking risk, right? They want to put enough on the drawings to show intent, but not be responsible for the details, right? So now we've got all this IP technology, which exposes their design to the internet and cybersecurity risk now, right? So now you start talking cybersecurity risk to MEPs, now they're interested in hearing our story and taking on our assistance in designing systems and helping them put together specifications that eliminate that risk, right? And help them with things like cybersecurity policies and things like that are typically not in a BAS specification. So we've been pushing out Division 25 because most projects now are integration projects, right? So if you take a look at the CSI format of Division 25, integrated automation, there's section, subsection, subsection, subsection. What we've done is we've eliminated a lot of that unnecessary information and we broke it down into all of the hardware and software and policies that you would see in one of our systems integration drawings. So if you're at MSI and you're looking at a project that one of our engineers put together, you'll be able to look at the systems integration drawing, look at the schedule, and look at the specification, and they would all make sense and they would all match. Because I take a modular approach to it because that's how consulting engineers think. They think of systems as modular, right? You design a chilled water system. You've got your chiller, you've got your pumps, you've got your valves, you've got your piping. So our success has come from taking that modular approach and truly trying to educate them and not push projects or products.
That's awesome. And so John, moving over to the end user's perspective in terms of, so Bedrock has essentially, the property management group has its own IT group within. They've stood up a very immense OT network that connects to all the building controls managed by IT professionals.
Correct.
So, when you talk about owner-led, we always say, everybody asks me, Scott, what are the best, best implementations, best integrations? I always say when they're owner-led. John, can you speak to what it means owner-led when it comes to like pushing this new technology and specifying it? Could you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. What I mentioned earlier about getting involved from day one and being a building owner that wanted to drive the technical specifications and what we needed and what we wanted as we grew, we created the thought process and it turned into a team talking about BAS integration of content experts where we wrote our own specs, we wrote our own specifications. We had people in-house who were content experts. I brought a gentleman into the team and his education was network, IT networks. Never saw BAS, didn't know what a VAB box was, all these things, right? And then we also hired content experts who were either, installers working through BAS, programmers, et cetera. And we created a team that we then led the charge for what we wanted in our buildings. And, you know, you had mentioned, you know, we supply our own network. You had mentioned, you know, putting that on an MEP or the owner supplying, and we supply our own network. We have our own standards there. Our IT team, we're side by side. They build it and give the specs for security, et cetera, that we, you know, take it. Then we're on Google Cloud now because of the vast number of points we have with 110 buildings. But
got another customer, Sabine. Did you hear that?
yeah, absolutely. We're working together, right?
Yep.
And so at the end of the day, what that's created is, and I guess I'll say this out loud, you had talked about the struggle with MEP contractors and understanding the BAS portion. They have their requirements for building, you know, whatever it is we need MEP, right? But there was always that struggle or disconnect to, all right, now I need to automate that. Well, what is that, right? You know, so how we build our job, we supply the networks. We give not only mechanical specs, but BAS specs, and we provide these to any architect or MEP engineer that comes in to do work on our buildings. We sit down, we're upfront at every design meeting with our construction team, making sure that these are implemented into the drawings. We have the drawings made, like you had mentioned before, you know, to everything's pointed out. And we've evolved to the point where it's literally separate now on any construction or project that we do, where it's MEP, it's integration, it's network. They're all separate sets of drawings, separate sets of spec that we basically oversee all of that. And it's been great for us because it's been able to keep us in the know of what we can do, right, in our systems for the building owners. And then as we hired a chief sustainability officer in the middle of last year, we're getting a lot more company goals around sustainability, whether it's energy reduction, you know, decarbonization, et cetera. And it's very nice to be able to say, yeah, you know, we have that. We have these points. We can create a process for you for tracking our energy by the sub meters for tenants all the way to base building, you know, smart spec meters that we have. And it's really helped us give, you know, a tangible ROI on all these projects so that we can continue to get the capital to upgrade our systems and be more sustainable.
Yeah, and it's so impressive, owner-led in their case, as John mentioned. So, you know, you talk about owner-led and you talk about business integration within the owner. And as John mentioned, he's got usually 3 different working parts on any project, any construction project, and they're all coordinated with at his level to ensure that everything is looked at, right? So he has his traditional construction folks, he's got a BAS team, and he's got an IT team. And they coordinate all 3 of those on every project to make sure that the technology is successfully implemented, meets the facility requirements, meets the ESG requirements, and meets all the cybersecurity requirements that IT needs and the routing and all that good stuff. And so that to me, it's a great example of success. Now, when we introduced IP controls to that group, it didn't take long to get in their spec, needless to say. Why? It's because they understand their network. They understand their needs. They understand how their network works. And at the owner level, if you understand that, bringing in these new IP-based products is not that difficult. Not that difficult. Now, of course, as we've brought them in, we've created some potential cybersecurity concerns. But thank goodness we got Sabine and people like Google looking at that. And Sabine, could you talk to this a little bit about, first, could you speak to like how John talked about how Bedrock does it? Could you speak how Google does it to ensure that you guys are getting the best technology that you guys are looking for?
So, you know, we start with the business case, just like you've mentioned. There's so much we want to do with our buildings, always turn it into a better place. And quite clearly, we can't do it with the current technology. We're seeing more and more of those IP devices. If it's going to be IP enabled, you got to apply IT principles to it. So we're looking at open source. We're looking for flexibility and adaptability of the building. And the infrastructure we are adopting is what we call the horizontal infrastructure. We want to know what is in our building. We want to manage the IP devices in our building, and we want to control them by connecting them to our software-defined network. And so while we're applying all those IT principles. And so there's the concept of course, verifying the security aspect of the device. So Where we can, we will install IP devices. Again, there's a lot of opportunities with that. You already mentioned the the throughput, but if you have the device on the network, we can quickly send the data to cloud and make it a very optimal platform for smart building applications. We can manage that fleet. We can see it. We can manage it. And when I say fleet management is around firmware and configuration updates, configuration changes. That like reacting. Not only we're pulling the data into cloud and analyzing it and kind of understanding how to better optimize the building, but we want to turn around and control the system right back. And you can do that very much easily with an IP device. So the troubleshooting, the asset management, and if you just kind of think of the more recent Log4j vulnerability, wouldn't that be fantastic if we could just download firmware upgrade to all your IP device that could be vulnerable at one push? I don't think any one of us is actually capable to do that for large portfolio, but that is the end goal. So full visibility and manageability of your network. I can't remember what your other question was, like how we go about it, right? Like I said, we look at IT principle. We're moving away from OT or operation technology specific protocols. We're moving towards IT protocols like MQTT, like IPv6. So there's a lot of things we're looking at that are very common in the IT world and verified and proven. And that's what we're asking the industry to move towards. So what will be installed in our building are IP devices that are capable of meeting very specific requirements. And I think along the way, we're kind of sharing our findings with the manufacturer. If we find a device that is not on par with our security goals, we share that information and they fix their firmware and they fix different things so they can meet those requirements. And in return, I think there's value to, like I said, the entire industry. It's a costly process. But this said, as far as cost goes, when you start installing those devices, I do not believe it increased the cost. There's if we want to address cost, it is novel, and so I think like you say, people push back once they get over the hurdle and understand the capability and the opportunity, and then start embracing all the value you can get out of IP devices. You'll realize that the installation costs decreases. It's all on an existing network. You don't have to install another network necessarily, or on unmanaged network or random network. It is on an existing network, and so it decreases the installation. It decreases like the maintenance cost over time. And like I said, the installer and the technician, and the MSI get used to the requirement. And that leads to just a kind of a flat or decreased cost. Once you start automate configuration, that's, again, that kind of also lower the cost of installation and commissioning. So I can't remember if I addressed all the.
That was great, Sabine. Yeah. So follow-up question for you. So when you're looking at like an IP-based controller versus a serial 485 controller, you mentioned, and it was an important thing, is that the IP controls on a network are visible, manageable, updatable, versus the 485 devices are kind of dumb. They sit under a gateway, they require special application, not accessible on IP. So my question to you, Sabine, is which one's the bigger cybersecurity risk?
Well, it depends. So to us, anything that's unmanaged is a very high risk, right? You don't know anything about it. You try to put it under the radar and you think it's not a problem. If you get your HVAC system hacked, maybe it won't touch your IT network, but the tagline is Google's HVAC system was hacked. To us, it will be a big PR downside. It's a big problem for our employees. There's a risk, health and productivity risks. So unmanaged is a very scary world. Yeah, you just can't ignore it anymore. The attacks are there, things are happening. It used to be, we know the technology is not secure enough, let's put it on the side, at least it won't attack our IT network and we're protected. That is not a true, it is not at least an idea that we support. And so everything moved to our IT network. Now we have multiple layers of security. So sure, if it's on your IT network, there's risk to your IT network, obviously, but it's converged, but it's segmented. So it would never really go and touch your IT, but at least we have a really strong IT team with a lot of experience that can help us now apply their, like I said, best practices earlier and know what might happen. And if we know of vulnerability, we can go and fix it right away. If you know of a vulnerability and we know which device it's on and we know it's on an unmanaged network, I have to go and walk into that building and connect to that serial device and upgrade the vulnerability. We have tens of thousands of of devices in our building. We cannot do that. It's not scalable. So the only way to scale, the only way to manage it is to see it. So you can't do it haphazardly. Obviously, you do work with people that are strong in this IT world and understand IT network and can protect your building and your data in general. But that, I think putting your head in the sand and ignoring what's on the unmanaged network is just not it's not the way to go anymore. And besides that, if you try to solve some use cases, how can you integrate different systems that are on different network? You can't do that. How can you react and take that data and make decision and then push it back? You can't even push it back, right? If you find out the building is too hot, too cold, too this, nobody's in the building or whatever, and you want to update your set point, how do you do that on an unmanaged network that you can't connect to? And so, there's risk in every area. It's managed risk versus unmanaged risk. It's a choice. That's how.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Sabine. That was awesome. Awesome. Do you want to add?
For questions at the end?
We're going to do questions at the end. Hold on. Save it. We're going to do questions at the end. Don't want to open it up yet. We're almost to there. So we're moving over. Looking not just we talked about the design. We're looking at like the requirements of the owner and the needs and really the goals. Let's talk about it from a contractor point of view for a minute, okay? We also have Scott Popay with us. Scott, as I mentioned, has been putting in IP controls for the better part, I would say 6-7 years now. His company has been putting in IP-based systems. And Scott, could you just share with us some of your key learnings in general to start?
Absolutely. And I'd like to piggyback on really what, some of the things that others have brought up already. And that is, security is first and foremost in our mind as these systems that we're installing in buildings and the systems we're integrating to are becoming more and more integrated. And we're seeing commonly where we have point of sale systems on the same network as elevators, as the same network as parking, as a BAS, credit cards, and everything else. And so security becomes extremely important. And so as a contractor, certainly one of the things that we're really focused in on is security with our customers. However, one of the fun things that we found out about IP-based controllers over the years is, whereas there used to be a significant kind of step increase in the cost of the controller relative to a traditional MSTP controller, that cost has narrowed significantly for most product lines that I'm aware of. But even if that differential in the hardware remains, the savings that can be had on the labor side, the commissioning side of the projects, the installation side, far exceeds that. And so we are typically finding situations where just on the software download configuration and commissioning of those IP-based controllers, in some instances, we're getting 70% labor savings. 70%.
Wow.
So, a controller that used to take us, an hour to program or to get configured and check out, now it's 15 minutes. Partly that has to do with, you alluded to, the larger pipe of communication bandwidth, so we can really download configurations across a network much more rapidly to controllers rather than serial devices. But the other thing is that the onboard diagnostics and the power of those controllers is significantly greater. And so from a technician standpoint, we are realizing significant labor savings, not just on the commissioning as far as the local controller and loading the controllers, configuring them, but also on network troubleshooting. I mean, how many of us have been into an old RS-45 network and there's a ground loop on the secondary power, and it just pulls your network down and you have no idea where it is, right? We have those traditional troubleshooting tools that are really well understood and well adopted in the IT community aren't possible on a traditional RS-45 network. So with standard cabling practices and with standard managed IT network tools, the troubleshooting of communications becomes much simpler. And then Sabine also talked about a horizontal network architecture, and we've adopted that same philosophy as well. Many of you, I'm sure in the room, are put in network controllers such as a JACE, which is a piece of hardware. We have more or less almost stopped buying JACEs for our buildings. We're putting in the supervisory software on a flat architecture that is compliant with the best OT or IT practices today. And so now all that we need to do is install the software on an industrial kind of hardened PC with no moving parts. And now we have effectively replaced the JACEs in the building. So that's a hardware savings that can be had. The other thing that we've noticed is that installing subcontractors for controls, just like across our entire industry in construction, there's a shortage of skilled labor in all the trades. And a controls electrician, a controls installing electrician is, as you know, a specialty that goes beyond even a traditional division, 16 or is it 16? Yeah, it's been a while since I've even used those old numbers. A traditional job site electrician, as far as the skills required to install those systems. And so what we found is in many instances for less sophisticated projects that don't have a lot of pipe and wire, for like a chilled water plant or something that we need to stick build on site, that we can actually utilize a structured cabling subcontractor to come and install that system, where they're using pre-made cables, Cat 6 cables, and with the ends already on them, so they've been tested, and so it's literally plug and play. And so we found that not only is the skill level required lower, but also the installation time in many instances is faster. And then again, the troubleshooting is simpler because we're using the same cables for communications as we are to talk to maybe a wall-mounted sensor. A lot of the sensors that are coming out now are utilizing the standard RJ45 connectors. And so there's a lot of savings to be had in reality, even if the upfront cost of the hardware is a little bit more.
Thanks, Scott. And yeah, and with that, there's absolutely no question that IP-based projects versus 485 projects are certainly more cost effective. They certainly bring more benefits to the owner. And folks, the horse has left the barn. We're not going back. So, and with these,
that was the other thing I was going to say.
Yeah,
Scott,
with these benefits out there, I mean, it's over. The decision making is becoming exponential towards IP. And Scott, I'm sorry, you were going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, we are no longer installing traditional, RS-45 serial based communications networks in buildings unless it's a retrofit or a small addition rather to an existing facility. So anything greenfield or even brownfield, we're putting in IP-based controllers across the board, and really doing to do otherwise at this point is really doing your customers a disservice. It's the future. It's frankly the past at this point, right, Sabine? I mean, IP-based controllers.
I'll go even further, right?
Yep.
You mentioned people push back. That's true. We have that within Google too. Like the operation team is familiar with one implementation, and you try to change that on them, that they just push and kick and scream, and they don't want change. I also push it on the manufacturer. I'm telling the manufacturer, good collaboration, good relationship. The manufacturer that I trust is also the one that is showing those opportunity to the customer. So not only the building owner needs to push it, but if we don't know it, then the manufacturer has the responsibility to show where the technology is going and really, encourage the change as well. Like, it comes from different angle, including, like I said, including the manufacturer. And I feel like it's too easy to just continue the same design. Like, the design is copy pasted from building to building, and manufacturer are happily, getting the business because it's the same design, so they get the same business. And that to me is just really a disadvantage for the industry. And if we want to get somewhere, everybody is in it. Everybody has really to share the same message and move forward and help the resisting crowd for good reasons, right? Everybody's resistant for a very, very good reason, but help everyone see the light. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people.
I like that Sabine brought up manufacturers, and that's been one of the things that we've had to contend with. We're all dealing with right now is supply chain issues. And again, a flat architecture. I mean, how many of us in the room that install Niagara-based products had to deal with unexpected long lead times or surcharges, right? We did a lot. And so if you install a flat architecture, you bypass all that. You're buying software, right? And then also just chipsets in general. IP-based chipsets are much more readily available than some of the more specialty serial-based ones because they're legacy. So I totally agree with everything Sabine just said.
Well, I do too. I agree with Sabine, especially as we work with many of the large BAS manufacturers, and their incompetence inside of the people who develop these products in terms of IP is astronomical to us. That the people that are building these products often do not have expertise in IT. And you need to talk to your manufacturers like Sabine did and be like, no, you folks got to get your what together if you're going to be building these controls on IP networks, because you know what they're doing? They're leaving us vulnerable as an industry to be hacked, to be messed with, because IT is not that simple, and there is true competence in it. And our vendors, our manufacturers of these controls, they need to continue to force themselves to get more competent in that area. When they had 485, they could just do it. They could do it however they wanted. Nobody could say anything. Well, that's not the case anymore. That's not the case. And they need to understand that, our manufacturers do. They're building us some great products though, folks. I don't want to give them too much grief, but I just like to see a little bit more in terms of like their thought in terms of cybersecurity and other areas of IT that we feel like they're still weak. So be careful.
And Scott, I'd like to add something from a contractor's perspective. I know we've got a lot of integrators out here. How many of you guys have actually installed an IP project? By show of hands. Okay, so we do have a few. I know that just like the design community, there's some reluctancy to get into it. And I'd like to share a real brief story about one of our customers. We've got a customer who's runs a small controls group at a large contractor, a large mechanical contractor, has a small controls group. 3 years ago, I did a presentation on an OT network solution that we sell, right? Purely based on the technology itself. 3 years afterwards, he gives me a call. He goes, hey, Greg, remember that solution, that OT network stuff you talked to me 2 years ago about? Well, I think I have a project. A large municipal project that had 4 buildings, huge project, had 4 buildings, and an engineer out of Texas laid the job out. I took a look at the drawings. The drawings were about, someone guess, what percentage you think the drawings were complete?
10%.
10%. They were a little more complete than 10%. But coming from a consulting engineering background, I understood the intent, right? But there wasn't enough information in there for them to really bid the project. And his group told him that he had to split the project up in scope between a large controls entity that they typically use, which was a branch office, and his smaller controls group. My advice to him was, he who controls the data or the data architect and controls the network is going to have that customer forever. So I split the job up for them, did all the drawings. We suggested that we would do the drawings. We would lay out the entire network for free. So you ask, why would we do that? Well, A, because it was a fiber-based solution, we were able to lay out the fiber so they can get a number from a structured cable guy because they couldn't do it with the existing drawings. B, it helped us to bid the hardware and the software because everything was included on the drawings that we provided. C, those drawings would eventually turn into submittal drawings, right? And D, they took the drawings to a post-bid interview. Now, if you're a consulting engineer, and you laid out a job that you knew in your heart was about 50% complete, and someone showed up with the entire network laid out from top to bottom, all the way down to the sub-networks. I'm talking the VPN, the firewall, there was a couple servers, on-premise servers, cell modem, the whole 9 yards. All this stuff is laid out. Would you choose that contractor that laid it all out?
No.
That's because you're more savvy, right? But the engineer who didn't put together a complete set of documents would choose that contractor. That job is currently under construction. It's almost done. And like Scott Pape said, I've talked to the systems integrator, and they said that now that they're about 50 or 60% into the job, that the turnaround time on installing these IP devices has probably went and saved them 50% in labor up to this point. So for us, we can assist you in designing these IP jobs if you're afraid to take that leap as a contractor, right? Because there's a lot of things involved.
Yep, and
I also want to.
Go ahead,
I
Scott.
was also going to, yeah, just one more thing, I guess, is point I wanted to make earlier. We keep talking about the resistance that we're running into kind of as an industry, primarily, I think, at the consulting engineering community. And what I would encourage everyone here who is a system integrator or manufacturer's rep is to understand that us who are at the ground level with these systems are the experts. It's incumbent upon us to educate the consulting engineering community, right? And so in the early stages, if some of you are looking at being early adopters when it comes to, or rather looking to do your first IP-based project, there's definitely some pitfalls, right? Some things to watch out for. But what I would really encourage you to do is to take a traditional job if the system is not laid out to be IP based. Take a traditional MSTP job and work with your manufacturer, work with Cochrane, supply, work with experts, that are in the industry, and lay out an IP based network and bring that back to the engineer and say, this is what we want to do. And there's no cost impact to the job. We want to bring this customer. We want to make sure that they're utilizing the latest technology that's available in the industry. And here's how we're going to do it. And I guarantee you, they're going to say, thank you. And that'll be the result.
And they're going to ask for your drawings.
So take that plunge, folks. Go ahead. Don't be scared, right? Just run out and go switch that 485 job over to IP right away. So, all right, we have time for some audience questions.
I'll let them ask first, but no.
Are you sure? Any questions?
Let them.
Okay, we'll say, we only got 7 minutes, Paul, so.
I can wrap it up in 2.
Thank you. So, yeah, we get it. IP is the way to go. And we're sitting in a room with controls contractors, and not many people have gone there. I would ask the panel how you respond to Gartner or NIST. And I want everyone to hear this, not as an additional complication for what you're about to jump into, but actually good news, where Gartner and NIST say, really using IT, traditional IT, for the OT ain't gonna work. it's too complicated, it's too expensive, it's too risky, it's too cyber insecure. So I would say to everyone here, are you guys pushing the MEP community to take a look at new technology and not try to bring legacy technology into our fledgling IP space?
Good question. Anybody you want me to start? I'll start. So briefly, you're exactly right, Bill. I think Greg or somebody said it, we're trying to serve things in I would say spoonfuls that people can eat.
Right.
And no, the MEPs are not ready for the entire IT industry to learn, right? So yes, we see a benefit in helping them specify products that are geared, and including IT-based products that are geared towards BAS. And we're, as a distributor, we have multiple products, including Bill's Satoshi Box,
I did not.
which is a fantastic product, by the way, for everybody. Thank you, Bill, for that. No, we do enjoy it. Never send a tech to a job site without one. Just saying. If you want a remote community, never send them without a Satoshi Box. But we certainly find that pushing products that are geared towards our industry from an IT perspective have made it a lot easier for our industry to accept this new change.
Yes.
I would like to speak.
Anybody else want to answer that question?
Yeah, let me answer. I think you need to start with a standard, right? What does that mean to be secure in this network? What are the requirements? So that's how you help the manufacturer. That's how you help the MEP. Like, what does it mean to be secure? How do you go about it? And you have alliances out there that are getting together. There's the RECC symposium. There's multiple organizations that are spending time around that. Let's make sure we're aligned on what we're asking the manufacturer, because if each of us ask for something different, it's not going to be very successful. So kind of getting behind the proper standard of what is the minimum set of requirement that the manufacturer has to meet. And then sharing the pain of how do you go and test it, because it's great to do lip service of something, but until it's verified, I wouldn't trust any IP device that goes on our network. So we'll have a qualification lab. There are qualification labs out there that go through the list of tests. We get 100 tests per device of things that need to be met before they can go on our network. And that's one first layer of security. There's many more layers after that, right? But I think first defining what it is and all aligning behind it is the first step.
Thanks, Bill. Great question. Next question?
He's ignoring me.
No, you said you were last. So we got one in the back.
But it pertains to this discussion. I just got two words: zero trust.
Zero trust for who, Paul?
Network
Network,
devices.
yeah.
Oh, for network.
Zero trust. So
Because if you go by that policy,
Paul's an owner's rep, and he's speaking to the cyber risk of all these new IP devices, which is immense, right?
and then I would like to also add, the industry is changing in the IT community as well. As Sabine mentioned, software-defined networks. Now you're able to create a device profile specific to a device that allows you to get that integrated into that software. And now your network can goes and scans the device, knows it's a trusted device, and allows you to plug into it.
Yeah, and for cybersecurity and scaling out projects, that will be super handy. So that's exciting.
And it's starting to become more available, not at the high dollar guys, but now I know you guys use it, so.
Well, good stuff. One more question.
So this whole talk was about encouraging us to go from RS 485 to IP, which is great. It sounds like the future is like us. No one in this room has really done that. Based off the hands that I saw earlier, as all you guys have more experience in doing it, what are some of the pitfalls we should look out for going from RS 485 to IP?
It's probably good. Scott pay.
Yeah, I'll just say that it requires that you educate everybody in the process to make it go right. All the way back from the owner to the consultants, that everybody has, because it is more complex. There are more things that need to be considered, and if you just go and slam an IP system into a building without understanding what the cyber risk might be of doing that, you could be making a big mistake, right? So I think it's really understanding and education is really the biggest pitfall, because that's what it takes to do it right. More from my panelists?
I mean,
Yeah.
I could chime in here as well. I mean, you're asking a really pragmatic question, right? Which is, how do I go from being a system integrator that's only done serial comms up till now to doing IP-based controls? It seems like a really big lift, and there is a lot of education, and sure, that is the answer. And I would just say the best way to do it is OJT. As in, find a candidate project and work with your manufacturer. They've already crossed this bridge for you. I'm sure if you called up your manufacturer and said, hey, instead of that old order where I would have gone and bought the same old stuff you've been making for the last 15, 20 years, I want to buy some of your newer stuff that's been out for the last 4 or 5 years. Can you help me lay out a network, right? You can also work with experts like Bill, who's in the audience, right? And some of his products around Satoshi Box. He'd be happy to help you lay out a network. I'm sure Greg Fitzpatrick, there's a lot of knowledge in the room right now, and also incumbent or inherent in your manufacturers that can help you make that leap. It's not as scary as it seems, and I would just encourage you all to really take the leap and do it. You might struggle, you might skin your knees a little bit on that first project, but you'll learn a lot along the way, and you just got to go. Got to go.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to that is it also depends on how large of a real estate owner you are. So if you're a large real estate owner like Google, it's important to work with your IT division, obviously, and just kind of combine effort and really create that team that understand both IT, OT, and build up that relationship and understand where their concerns are, understand what the OT world concerns are, and work it together. That is not obviously a solution for everybody. So if a much smaller company, I imagine, can work with solution providers like software-defined solution, there are some out there. There are experts out there that can install it for you and manage the network for you and provide some guidance at that level. There are consultants and others. But I totally agree that I wouldn't go at it on your own, and could be a complete disaster and really get to the opposite to what you're trying to accomplish. So.
John or Greg, anything in closing?
Just real quick, the project that I mentioned to you guys before that the integrator did, his first IP project, the same speech that Scott Pape just gave about starting with a smaller project, just taking a project and cutting your teeth. Because remember, the technology is the technology, right? So once you've deployed the technology, whether it's a big project or a small project, it's still scalable, right? So I said the same thing to them back, I think 3 years ago. They didn't do it, and they cut their teeth on a project that included 4 buildings, multi-story, the whole 9 yards. But, for them, we're supporting them, right? Lucky for them, we're supporting them. But like I said, we can support you on anything from a small to a large project.
No, and I would echo both Greg and Sabine's comments. On the IT, I mean, we're so close with IT, we collaborate, even to the point where the built controls team that started with engineering is now direct report through IT.
It is.
On the network, software, all that side, tying our other systems in.
Yep, the facilities folks at Bedrock report to a chief technology officer.
Exactly right.
How cool is that?
And they still work with myself on the mechanical install and use part of it. So it's changed so much in the last couple of years. And we did the same thing with IP. We started with small, did a small one and tested it out with our contractor partners, et cetera. And I love it.
I think that was some good, consistent advice. Start small and take the plunge. Well, everybody, thank you. Panelists, thank you. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.